The street I grew up on is on the borderline of Westchester and the Bronx. The south side of Westchester was a lower and or middle class neighborhood. I guess my father or other folks from his generation, that was their a dream fulfilled, to get a house with a piece of grass and, car on the...
2 Academy Awards. A body of work so commanding, so architecturally precise in its construction, that film schools will still be dissecting it a century from now. A name that, when spoken in any room, on any continent, requires no further introduction. No last name, no filmography citation, no context, just Denzel. And every person in that room knows exactly who you mean, exactly what he represents, exactly the standard he has set for what it means to be a man of craft, of discipline, of uncompromising artistic integrity in an industry that devours both integrity and men with equal indifference. At 71, Denzel Washington is not merely famous. He is institutional. He is the benchmark, the reference point, the name other actors invoke when they want to describe what they are reaching toward, knowing, most of them, that they will never reach it. And yet. But here's what nobody asks. What happens to a man who has spent 50 years being everything to everyone? The hero, the villain, the prophet, the warrior, the symbol, and has almost nothing left in that catalog that is simply, quietly his? What happens when the armor that protected you from the world becomes so fused to your body that you can no longer tell where the armor ends and the man begins? What happens when the thing that saved you, the discipline, the faith, the ferocious work ethic that dragged you out of Mount Vernon and deposited you at the center of American cinema, begins in the quieter hours of your 71st year to feel less like salvation? Here is what the world sees when it looks at Denzel Washington, a man who moves through space with the gravitational authority of someone who has never, not once, doubted his own right to occupy it. A man whose jawline was sculpted by a deity with strong opinions about symmetry. A man whose laugh, that sudden, unguarded, full-body laugh, is one of the most disarming things in Hollywood because it arrives without warning from behind the monument. The world sees the performances: Training Day, Malcolm X, Philadelphia, Fences, Glory, Man on Fire, a catalog that reads less like a filmography and more like a sustained argument made over 5 decades at the highest possible volume that black men contain multitudes, that they are capable of every shade of human complexity, that they deserve the full canvas. He made that argument with his body, with his voice, with the terrifying stillness he brings to a scene that makes every other actor in the frame suddenly aware of how much space they are wasting. But the golden cage is built always from the finest materials. And for Denzel Washington, the cage was constructed from the very thing that set him free: the standard. Because to be Denzel means that every role must justify the legend. Every performance must defend the body of work that preceded it. Every public appearance must carry the weight of what he represents, not just to Hollywood, not just to Black America, but to every young man who has ever watched him on screen and felt for the first time that dignity was something that could be performed without apology. That is not a career. That is a calling. And callings, unlike careers, do not offer retirement packages. Go back. Go back to Mount Vernon, New York. Go back to the 1950s and early 60s, to a city that sits just north of the Bronx like a footnote, close enough to feel the gravitational pull of New York's ambition, far enough away to know that the pull doesn't apply to you. Not automatically, not without cost. Go back to a barber shop on the main street of a city that smells of hair oil and ambition, and the particular kind of striving that black communities in mid-century America wore like a second skin, because striving was survival, and survival was the only luxury available. His father is there, Denzel Washington Sr., a man of the church, a Pentecostal minister who carries God in his chest like a furnace and discipline in his hands like a tool. A man who understands, in the bone-deep way that certain fathers understand, that the world his son will inherit is not designed for his son's flourishing, that a black boy in America needs more than talent. He needs armor. He needs a code. He needs something inside him that cannot be stolen, cannot be diminished, cannot be taken by the machinery of a culture that will try, repeatedly and creatively, to reduce him. The armor the elder Denzel provides is faith and work, and the absolute refusal to accept less than what you are capable of. His mother, Lennis, runs a beauty salon. She is the pragmatist, the woman who understands that God helps those who show up early and stay late, who builds a business with her hands in a world that offers black women in business approximately no infrastructure and zero margin for error. Between these two people, the minister and the entrepreneur, a boy is being assembled. He carries both of them like a debt. Not a debt of resentment, a debt of obligation. The obligation to justify the sacrifices that were made before he was old enough to understand what sacrifice meant. The obligation to transform their survival into something magnificent. To take the barbershop and the church and the cracked sidewalks of Mount Vernon and forge them into something the world would have to look at directly. And then, his parents' marriage dissolves. He is 14 years old. 14, and the architecture of the world he thought was permanent, the minister father, the entrepreneur mother, the specific geometry of their family, cracks down the middle and falls apart. He doesn't fall apart with it. Or rather, he does fall apart in the ways that 14-year-old boys fall apart when the foundational myth of their lives fractures. But something else happens simultaneously. Something hardens. Something focuses. The dissolution of the family becomes the forge. The pain becomes fuel of a grade so pure it will burn for 50 years. It required him to put down, one by one, the instruments of his own punishment. The voice that said the work was never good enough. The arithmetic of the academy that kept finding reasons to honor the villain more readily than the prophet. The mathematics of an industry that celebrated him while simultaneously limiting him. And the internal tribunal that convened every time the gap between what he deserved and what he received became too wide to ignore. He put them down. Not easily, not all at once, not without the kind of sustained spiritual effort that people who have not needed to do it tend to underestimate. But he put them down. And what he found on the other side of that putting down was not emptiness. It was Pauletta. It was the children, grown now, making their own arguments in the world. It was the church and the ministry and the specific frequency of meaning that has hummed beneath everything he has ever done since a boy sat in a pew in Mount Vernon and watched his father fill a room with something invisible and completely real. It was the work, not his obligation now, but his choice. The rarest luxury available to a man of his generation and his industry, the ability to work because the work still means something, not because the machine requires feeding. At 71, Denzel Washington is not diminished. He is distilled. What remains is the essential thing. The minister's son from Mount Vernon, who discovered on a college stage in the Bronx that human beings could tell each other the truth through fiction, who spent 50 years doing exactly that, who gave the culture Malcolm and Troy and Alonzo and Robert McCall and dozens of other human beings so precisely rendered that they have become part of the shared vocabulary of what it means to be alive in this particular historical moment, who built a marriage and a family and a faith in the middle of an industry that is actively hostile to all three, who paid the debt, not to Hollywood, not to the Academy, not to the box office or the critics or the machinery of fame that creates monuments and then waits with unnerving patience for the moment when the monument begins to crack. He paid it to the boy in the pew, to the minister at the pulpit, to the mother in the salon who understood that love without structure is just sentiment. The debt has been paid. What remains is grace. And grace, in the end, is the only currency that matters.
The question of what comes after is more specific. After the performing, after the monument phase, after the decades of being the standard, the benchmark, the man other men point to when they want to describe what excellence looks like. What remains that is simply, privately his? He has said he wants to direct, to produce, to be the author of stories rather than the instrument through which other people's stories are told. It is the natural evolution of a man who has spent 50 years mastering the art of inhabitation and is now, in the quieter register of his 70s, interested in construction. He has spoken about grandchildren, about the texture of ordinary days, about the specific, irreplaceable pleasure of a life that is not always pointed toward the next achievement. He has spoken about God with the directness of a man who no longer has any reason to be diplomatic about what he believes. And he has said, in the way that men of genuine self-knowledge say things that sound simple but carry tremendous weight, that he has made peace with the idea that his legacy is not his to control, that he planted seeds, that the planting was the work, that what grows from the planting is between the seeds and God. Here is the truth about Denzel Washington that the awards don't capture, and the box office numbers don't reflect, and the profile pieces only occasionally approach. He is not at peace because he succeeded. He is at peace because he decided, somewhere in the long middle passage of a life that has been, by any measurable standard, extraordinary, that peace was worth pursuing with the same intensity he had brought to every role, every film, every standard he had set and then exceeded. That peace cost him something.